Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we have some rather exciting news. You've seen the trailer before, but now we're going to discuss the rule pack. We at the Great Book of Grudges are going to host a grand campaign to be filmed as a battle report series. Something in a massive scale which probably hasn't been seen ever in the history of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, so it should be kind of cool. Now, that being said, what you're seeing on the screen is the rule pack at the moment, and don't worry, there'll be information on where you can download it later on. But please note that this is a current beta rule pack, so it's still being developed and it's currently on its 6th version, which is currently 12 pages, and it is going to expand as things actually move ahead. But without further ado, let's move on. Welcome to the Grand Campaign. The Grand Campaign is set on the entire of the Warhammer fantasy world. A fan-made map divides each location in the world itself into various provinces and regions, which players will set out from their respective lore-friendly capital in order to take control of the Warhammer world. The map itself will be shown in a video in the future once we start teasing it. Each race within the Warhammer world will begin within one lore-friendly region and one army made up of up to 2,000 points under their control. From there, they will be able to expand their territories, raise new armies, and battle against any enemies they may encounter. The point of this campaign is to truly see how the end times would turn out if left at the hands of respective armies and players, rather than based on Games Workshop's fluff sense. Every turn and battle will be dictated throughout their own respective videos, and an overview video will be created for any basic turn mechanics. Movement, racial overview, etc., with battle reports being filmed as our current Old World series format. So that's the settings, now let's move on to the turns. As with most, if not all tabletop games, the Grand Campaign will feature a turn-based system with how armies will act. Turns will follow each army in alphabetical order as they go throughout their turns, which includes moving, raising armies, launching invasions, and any diplomatic relations to be voted upon the community. For example, the Beastmen would be first, followed by the Bretonnians, Chaos Dwarves, Demons of Chaos, etc. Each turn has the following process: overview of the race, faction strength and kingdom, any income gained from capturing and controlling provinces, army movement dictated by a D3 dice roll for each respective army, any battles that may take place, their own videos as battle reports, obviously because those are quite long. At the end of one full world turn, every army has moved and played any battles they must play, an overview video will be produced as a recap of said turn. The next section of this rule pack is called Fleeing and Fighting. As turns progress, armies will encroach on other racial territories, and indeed begin to invade them. Should a race directly move onto a territory owned by another race, it is considered that war has been declared. As stated before, should the territory be owned by another race, the moving army will capture the territory and no longer move any further, even if they still have remaining movement. However, if the territory is garrisoned by an enemy army, the defending army has the following choices. It can either 1. Stay and fight, which then a battle report will then be produced, or flee. The player may choose to have their army flee to a directly neighbouring territory, but they may not flee again if another army has landed on their territory. As with all campaigns, there's usually an income system. An in-game income system is rather important in the Grand Campaign as it is the only way races can field other armies. Each area of the map is divided into regions and provinces where income is gained per turn of control. Acquiring a number of regions will not only gain you income in the same turn, but rather in the following turn. Each region within a province gains you 25 income per turn, and controlling a whole province gets you an extra 50 per turn. For example, controlling Karak 8 Peaks and the areas associated with it to be highlighted on the campaign map will net you 150 income per turn. Faction capitals, the region that each faction begins with, will net you 150 per turn. This does not include any extra income for eventually controlling the provinces. As stated before, your income is used to field armies. In terms of association, one game currency is equal to 1 Warhammer 8th edition point. To field an army, you must spend a total number of points of currency equal to the army you wish to field in terms of points. Please note that the same 8th edition restrictions do apply when fielding armies, for example, 25% core restrictions. Naturally, once you start controlling more territories, you will get a lot of income, so we've actually decided to implement a tax system and a faction upkeep system. First, let's look towards the tax system. There will come a time where empires may rise and generate a lot of turn-based income. In an effort to balance this, we've come up with a system that to still allow armies to be fielded, but at a greater cost. Your first army is considered free when you begin the campaign. Your second army will cost you as explained in the income system, But from then on, all armies that you field afterwards will begin to cost you more. A increasing 10% income tax will come into effect when fielding multiple armies. For example, your third army will cost its point value, so for example 2,000 points, plus a 10% baseline, which will then cost 2,200 points in total. Any future armies will then add in an extra 10% to that total. For example, Army 4 will cost 2,000 plus 20%, and Army 5 will cost 2,000 plus 30%, and so on. This will stop any bigger factions from getting way too many armies and overwhelming the map and just taking over the map very quickly. Next, we'll look towards the faction upkeep system. As tax is expected throughout this campaign in order to keep certain races from vastly overpowering any others, so too will there be an upkeep system to be implemented to further add to this. As before, your first army is free, but any future armies you spawn will reduce your total income by 50 income. For example, if you have a natural income of 400 per spawning turn, your second army will reduce it to 350, and so on and so forth. Naturally, this is just to slow things down. We don't want races who are very far away in the map, like for example the lizardmen in Lustria, spawning loads and loads of armies and eventually just engulfing the old world. Next, let's look towards new armies and changing units. At the start of every turn for each respective faction, and provided they have enough income, players will be able to recruit new armies into their forces. These armies may only be spawned within territory that they control, and must follow the usual restrictions when building an army in Warhammer Fantasy Battles 8th edition. When spawned, this army may not move on the turn it was created, but may still fight battles should the territory that it is defending is invaded. At some point during the campaign, players may wish to swap out units with various armies in order to fit the situation they may find themselves. Perhaps a Skaven army has invaded and they need more firepower rather than more just basic units. It is more than possible to swap out these units, but it is important to note that if any army composition is changed, that army may not move that turn. In regards to buying armies, your total point cost for that list is the amount of income needed to be spent. Example, if your army list costs you 1,991 points, then that's how much income you need to spend, not a full 2,000. Next, let's look towards the faction objectives. At the beginning of the campaign, each of the races will be provided with objectives. These are created to further the story. As time progresses, each race and faction will receive more objectives, whether they have succeeded or failed their previous one. An example of this would be giving reason for the Empire to unify all of its provinces in return for special units or spawning of a new army. This is done so the narrative aspect of the campaign continues at a steady and encouraging pace for the players. That being said, we've spoken about all the races, but let's actually look towards what races will be featured in this campaign. The races featured in this campaign are as follows. Please note that they're not in alphabetical order. The Empire, the Dwarves, Bretonnia, High Elves, Dark Elves, Wood Elves, Skaven, Beastmen, Warriors of Chaos, Demons of Chaos, Orcs and Goblins, Ogre Kingdoms, Lizardmen, Tomb Kings, Vampire Counts, and Chaos Dwarves. There are also special races and factions featured in this, which is Norska, which is a stripped-down version of the Warriors of Chaos roster with some added units from Forge World, the Legions of Nagash, which is Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts together, and the Grand Legions of the Ever-Chosen. We are hoping to implement Kislev, but it's still yet unknown if we can feature them in this campaign or not due to the fact of leaving the models. Each of these races and factions will be given their own starting location to begin an empire within a lore-friendly location, naturally. Now, in order to make the campaign more narrative-feeling and more engaging for the local players, we've also decided to give each of the race special racial rules, essentially. As each of the races in the Warhammer world break out to forge out their own empires of their own, many of them will have special objectives, which will allow them to unlock various units and items that do not feature in their respective army books. That being said, they also have different things that they can do, so let's look through them in, once again, not alphabetical order. The Empire will gain access to halflings upon capturing the Moot, will gain access to the End Times units, heroes and items when the End Times have been triggered. They will also be granted access to Cult of Ulrich units upon full unification of the Empire. The Empire will be granted access to the units within the Thrones of Chaos book as a early access thing just from the start, and will only get access to the Marienburg landship if Marienburg belongs to the Empire. The Empire may also trigger a special event where they can establish the New World colonies in Lustria for double the price of a standard army. So for example, 4,000 points plus whatever extra they need to pay due to upkeep and tax. The Dwarves will gain access to End Times units, heroes, items, and so on when the End Times has been triggered. If destroyed, a second chance will allow the dwarves to spawn an army at any of the lost holds, those in the Southlands and Lustria. If defeated by another race, all dwarf armies will gain hatred in their next battle against that race, unless a ceasefire has been called or they have won a battle. And lastly, dwarves will be able to travel through mountainous terrain on the world map without trouble, their standard D3 movement, but may not take any territories until the next turn. Next we have Bretonia, who are able to launch crusades, which allows them to raise an army in any seaport location of the world map at double the points cost of a normal army. Once again, they will gain access to all the end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered, and the Green Knight may never truly be killed until he is revealed to be Guild Leveredon. Now we look towards the High Elves, who will gain access to end times units, heroes and so on when the end times have been triggered. If Malekith declares himself King of the Elves, capturing Ulthuan, Tyrion and his forces may recruit Dark Elves, and the High Elves may also recruit creatures of the sea such as merworms and so on from Forge World. Next we look towards the Dark Elves, who will gain the usual end times units, heroes and stuff when the end times have been triggered, but if Malekith declares himself King of the Elves, capturing Ulthuan, he may recruit High Elves and Wood Elves. Now, you guys might notice a pattern here with those two elves, and yes, that is an end times feature, but they should be able to capture Ulthuan pretty much before that anyway, so it can happen. And yes, I am putting the Dark Elves restriction to actually trigger the High Elves too. Give them a fighting chance. Next we look towards the Wood Elves, who once again get the units, the heroes and the items when the end times have been triggered. I'm going to be saying that so much today. They can travel around the world map via the world routes and pop up in different locations of the world. And finally, they may choose to either join the Dark Elves or the High Elves if Malekith declares himself Phoenix King. This is something to work in the diplomacy route, which we will talk about in a future video. Next, my favourite faction, the Skaven, who will get access to end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered. The Skaven may travel underground. When choosing to do so, they move as normal, but they may not capture territories until the next turn. And they may spawn a friendly army at the known locations of major clans for double the point cost of normal armies. For example, a Clan Molder army can spawn at Hell Pit as an event trigger. Now we're going to look at the Beastmen, who desperately needed some love in 8th edition, so I think I'm being fairly fair. Beastmen Brayherds will spawn after a Beastmen army has successfully defeated 3 enemy armies in a row, which counts as 500 extra points of a reinforcement army. I think that might give them a little bit of an edge and keep them alive. We know that the Beastmen army book has not been kind to them. Next, Morgor is a creature known of the very essence of chaos. When slain, he may revive instantly and lead another army, provided that the player has the expendable currency, of course. They will gain access to end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered, and will become part of the Grand Legions of the Everchosen when the end times have been triggered officially. This is a really cool mechanic that we'll look towards later. Next, the Warriors of Chaos, who once again will gain access to the end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered. They will become part of the Grand Legions of Everchosen also. And lastly, they will be able to recruit units from the Thrones of Chaos army book if Chaos has conquered the East. Any Chaos faction may hold territory in this region, so it could be the Chaos Dwarves or whatever. As long as that's happened, that boosts up the Warriors of Chaos. Now we look towards the Demons of Chaos, who will get access to the end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered, and will join the Grand Legions of the Everchosen. But also what makes them unique is by using the power of the Warp, Demons of Chaos may spawn armies anywhere in the world for double the price of a standard army. Very similar to the Bretonia mechanic, however, these guys will be able to spawn anywhere, so the demon player can have a lot of fun with this and start harassing different players. Now, the Orcs and Goblins, which will gain access to end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered. And now there's actually something very unique. They'll also take the Beastmen mechanic about spawning a war, which will give them 500 extra points of being reinforcements for them, which will make them a little stronger. But also they will gain access to the Ogre Kingdom units if the Ogre Kingdoms had been destroyed completely. Speaking about the Ogre Kingdoms, they're up next, which will gain access to end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered. But now there's something very unique to these guys. They may hire out man-eaters to serve other races at a cost, which means that the Empire and other races can buy man-eaters to use in their armies, but at the choice of the Ogre Kingdom player. Lastly, as a true neutral race, the Ogre Kingdoms can actually move through any territory they wish, provided they had the permission of other races. This gives them a bit of a Dogs of War mechanic feel, because we know that a lot of ogres get hired out by other races. Now let's look towards the Lizardmen, who will gain access to end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered. If destroyed, a second chance will allow the lizardmen to spawn an army at any lost temple cities, usually around the Southlands region. And lastly, Lord Croak may only truly be killed when the end times have been triggered. You get to spam him as much as you want. Now the Tomb Kings, who will gain access to units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered. They will eventually lose access to Arkan the Black when the end times have been triggered or a special event has been triggered, and they do not serve. The Tomb Kings may not join any Grand Alliance, but may make peace with the forces of Order. Now let's look towards the Vampire Counts, who will gain access to end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered. They will gain access to human servants. If Sylvania has been properly unified, the Vampire Counts may also recruit any core units from the Empire Army book. Vlad may not be recruited until the end times have been triggered, end times variant only, and Isabella may not be recruited until her chaotic variant that joins Chaos has been defeated. This is more of a lore-friendly thing. They're not supposed to be alive during 8th edition. Now the Chaos Dwarves, who will gain access to end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered, and will eventually become part of the Grand Legions of the Everchosen when that event triggers. However, they've got something quite interesting, that they will be able to recruit Black Orc units should Orcs and Goblins have been defeated fully. We have some special rules with Kislev just in case we can actually get this army up and running for this, so let's look at them. They have a pact with the Emperor, which Kislev may recruit Imperial artillery but not steam tanks, and once again, access to end times units, heroes and items should they be triggered. We're allowing the Imperial artillery thing because they really don't have a big army book. I'm looking at the 6th edition supplement right now and I think they have like 6 or 7 units, so we wanted to make sure that they actually have something to make them last a little bit longer. Now we look towards Norska, which will gain access to end times units, heroes and items when the end times have been triggered, and they will become part of the Grand Legions of the Everchosen eventually. That being said, they may only recruit Marauders, Warhounds and Trolls from the Warriors of Chaos army book. Lords and Sorcerers may be recruited as normal, obviously, but they may also recruit Forge World units such as Skin Wolves, Fimir, and Chaos War Mammoths, all the like. We're going to have separate packs for all these races, don't worry, so it does sound a bit confusing, but it's all going to be highlighted on the Discord. I'll explain this near the end of the video. The Legions and the Gash will once again get access to the end times units, heroes and items. I'm actually getting kind of bored of saying that. Upon entering the world, they may recruit Vampire Count units and Vampire Coast units from the Vampire Coast supplement only. They can't recruit Tomb Kings until Nagash has actually done a special battle. Then moving towards the big one, the Grand Legions of the Everchosen, which will have access to all chaotic armies such as the Warriors of Chaos, Demons of Chaos, Chaos Dwarves and Beastmen, but also Skaven and Isabella until she is defeated. We've looked at them quite briefly now, and don't worry, there will be highlight videos on each of the races and factions as we get closer to the release of the Grand Campaign, but now let's look towards named characters. There are many well-known characters throughout the Warhammer world. Some are good, some are evil, and some have conflicting loyalties. These heroes and villains have had their names sung in praise and in fear across the world in one way or another. They are warriors, spellcasters, and leaders of repute. To represent their fame, when they are slain in battle, they must make a roll at the end of the battle in question to see if they have survived or were merely wounded or slain outright. When a character is slain, they must make a roll to see if they survive, which increases each time they are slain again. For example, the first time is represented as a 1+. Ones are always failed though, so you'll have to roll a 2+, second time is a 2+, 3+, 4+, and so on. If a character has a natural built-in ward save and has failed their original roll, they may make a ward save. Ward saves do not increase in terms of value, so they will always stay at their natural save. This is something to keep them alive for a little bit longer. Some characters in the Warhammer Fantasy world found themselves being supercharged during the end times. These models, known as Incarnates, will also come into play when the event triggers in the campaign, provided that 1. The end times have been triggered. The armies will need to be then adapted for the new point values, and 2. The character in question has not been slain before the end times were triggered. So for example, if you have Karl Franz and the end times triggers but he is now dead, he won't be able to become the supercharged Karl Franz. Now in regards to this, there is a big character that plays a massive point in the plot here, known as the Everchosen, so to represent that the end times are coming, there must always be an Everchosen. Should Archeon be ever fully outright slain, another champion of Chaos may rise to claim the mantle. The player controlling a Chaos faction may spawn a new army, should he or she have enough to disposable income, to kit out said lord however he or she wants. This Lord may not take any marks of chaos, but may join any unit with any mark of chaos. Instead, the Lord may gain the respective marks of chaos by the following means: facing and defeating an army of Slaanesh led by a Keeper of Secrets to gain the mark of Slaanesh, facing and defeating an army of Khorne led by a Bloodthirster to gain the mark of Khorne, and so on and so forth. These marks will be awarded to the champions for free and thus can spend extra points on other equipment. This is to make the champion actually feel like he is the Ever-Chosen. Faction leaders. Each race must be represented by its own respective faction leader. Barring the mechanics implemented in regards to the loss of an Ever-Chosen, should a faction leader be killed, another must be nominated at the start of the faction's next turn. The faction leader may be another named character or a generic lord, who will then have some of his or her stats improved to represent his or her ascension. As the campaign progresses, special in-game events will appear for each race of the factions of the Warhammer world respectively. These are events specially crafted to move the timeline towards the end times in a lore-friendly way. On occasions, characters may leave and join other races in order to continue progression of the story. Many events have happened within times nearing the end, and we'd like to represent this as much as throughout the campaign as possible. Should any major characters be slain before the important events revolving them take place, the Great Book team will think of new ways to make this event happen. Think of this as a fan-made separate timeline. In regards to events, we may also see some minor factions pop into the world. There will be special lists created by the members of the Great Book of Grudges, and normally a stripped-down version of the army book that they will represent that will appear in various parts of the world in order to present problems for any new factions or someone who's growing too strong. So for example, the Vampire Coast may appear at the Vampire Coast to slow down the Lizardmen, or we might have the Dwarves of Krakadrak appearing up north just to slow down the tide of chaos for a little bit. It has been mentioned that the campaign will start out as an 8th edition campaign, but then progress towards the end times. While this may be confusing for some, do not worry, we have a planned narrative that in theory should progress the story fluently. Naturally, we must take into account that races and factions may be destroyed before or during these events, and something will happen. We've already planned ahead and we more or less know what's going to happen. As the edition progresses towards the end, we'll see that the rules from the 8th edition will be moved towards the End Times edition, which may present some trouble, but don't worry, we've got that plan too. This is new magic rules, new units, and so on. We understand that the End Times books favour certain factions over others, namely Chaos, so in an effort to keep balance strong throughout this, we've decided that we'll keep the 25% core requirement so as to not upset any major balance changes near the end of the campaign. As you know, near the end of the book, the restrictions are lifted and yeah, it becomes a bit weird. So lastly, let's just talk about the goal here. The goal of this campaign is to see what race would actually dominate the Warhammer world if given the sandbox setting. It is very obvious that the army book creed favoured some armies more than others, but nonetheless, it should make for an interesting, community-driven experience. There's no specific end date to this campaign, rather we want to see it progress naturally. It may take a year, maybe more, but the end we'll truly see what would happen during the end times. There is no official start date for this just yet. We are building armies left, right and centre, and there will be a lot more teaser videos coming out about the campaign in the future, but I just wanted to put this out there, see if there's any interest and so on, see what you guys think, how you guys could give some ideas to make this even cooler. It's all up to the community. We want this to be a community-driven thing. But with that, my friends, before we go into more and more talking, we've been here for almost half an hour now, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. Thank you to our Patreons and our supporters through our affiliate links in Element Games, because this does help. You're actually funding this a little bit with the extra cash coming into the channel. It really does help out. We've got a massive scale idea and it's going to be absolutely insane, but we're going to look forward to see what's going to happen. And with that, my friends, thank you so much once again. I shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.